Hi, everybody. Today's Monday, August 18th, 2025, and our friend Paul Craig is back with us. Welcome back, Paul.
Thank you, Nima. It's always a pleasure to speak with someone who's intelligent.
Paul, I want to start with the meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. We talk about it, what we were somehow speculating on what would happen and all of that. What is your understanding? What has happened during the meeting in the aftermath of that?
The meeting in the aftermath of that meeting?
Yeah. Yeah. The way
You
that the
mean
United States is talking about it, Russia is somehow they feel it was positive in the eyes of Russians. In the eyes of the United States, Donald Trump feels positive, but the mainstream media tries to do everything to just manipulate that the situation. Your take on that? What has happened during the meeting?
well, if you're talking about the meeting that started this, Trump and Putin, um, I think you and I talked about it. It had two happy and promising outcomes. One was that Trump agreed that an immediate ceasefire was a mistake. Uh, so that pressure came off of the negotiations. Trump agreed with Putin that the goal should be building the foundations for a long-term, more general peace. So that I thought was helpful, and I thought also that Putin's statement, which put a positive light on the meeting, was hopeful. But as you know, we pointed out there were two major barriers to any reconciliation between the West and Russia. And one was the doctrine of American hegemony, which is the neoconservatives' definition of American foreign policy. The main goal of American foreign policy is to prevent the rise of any country that could put a constraint on American unilateralism. Well, that's Russia, that's China. And in a regional sense, it's Iran. So, under the existing American foreign policy doctrine, Russia, Iran, and China are enemies, period. They're defined as enemies. They are constraints on American unilateralism. And the foreign policy doctrine calls for overthrowing these constraints. So this makes the whole notion, until this doctrine is repudiated, it has not been, it makes it impossible for the United States and its Western puppets to come to a peaceful agreement with Russia, a mutual security agreement. So that has to be dealt with before anything hopeful can happen. And the other constraint we said was the interest of the military security complex, which President Eisenhower warned us about in 1961, and which has grown tremendously in the very long period since that time. And their interest is having an enemy. Because if they don't have an enemy, what's the justification for the enormous budget, the enormous power, the covert operations, the unaccountability of the CIA's covert operations? None. And so they need this enemy. And so the prospect that there could be a mutual security agreement between Russia and the United States, it cuts across their interest. Well, how do you move such a powerful institutionalized force out of the way? They're in every American state, either as a military base or as a weapons manufacturer. So they have the Congress locked up. They've got the governors locked up. So Trump can't run over these people. They're too many. They're too powerful. They're too institutionalized. He's not there long enough. The term of a president's 4 years. he's already now well into his first of the second term. So this is the real constraint. Now, what happened today? We don't know. Nothing. If you look at the accounts of the meeting, the only thing we see is that, again, the decision was made that it's not in the interest of the negotiations to pursue an immediate ceasefire. So apparently, Zelensky has accepted that. So there's not to be an immediate ceasefire, but we don't know anything else. Nothing else has happened that we have heard from Trump or the people in the meeting. Now, what we have heard from Witkoff with reference to the first meeting, Putin and Trump, is very curious. In fact, I find it very disturbing. Witkoff has said two things that I don't believe could be true unless Putin has lost his mind. So what are these things? Well, one of them is Witkoff said that Putin had accepted that a land deal, where he would have Donbass, or no, he would have the areas that he has already reoccupied, and that the land swap would start at the current borders. He still hasn't gotten all of Donbass back, all of the Donetsk independent republic back, and the two areas in the southern part of Ukraine, he hasn't got all of those back. So he said, okay, we'll have a land swap when we stop at the current borders of our offensive. And we are open to considering trading the land we haven't reconquered for the land we have. Well, Putin has always said that, now that includes part of the land that's already incorporated back into Russia. So how is Putin saying, well, I'm going to give land that's already part of Russia back to Ukraine in exchange for this other land that I've conquered, in exchange for Ukraine's recognition? Makes no sense. If he's done that, he has collapsed as a force capable of opposing Western aggression. So how can this be true? And if it's not true, how can Witkoff say it? It's totally against Putin's position. Now, and what was the other thing he said? The other thing he said was that, Witkoff said that Putin had surrendered to the American position, and that Putin accepted NATO protection of Ukraine, not NATO membership of Ukraine, but NATO protection without the membership. So this is a way of saying, okay, Putin, we won't let them into NATO, but we're going to protect them as if they are in NATO. Well, why would Putin agree to that? This is fake. This is not real. Moreover, it's extremely dangerous especially for President Trump, because what it amounts, it's exactly like, Nima, this is exactly like the guarantee that Chamberlain gave Poland against Germany that started World War II. Why did it start World War II? Because it gave Poland the finger on the trigger. All Poland had to do was to tell Hitler to go to hell. We're not going to give you back the German territories we have. When they were on the verge, before the British guarantee, of coming to a peaceful agreement. Well, now Trump has, if this goes through, Trump has handed control over the situation to Zelensky. Putin doesn't have any control. Trump doesn't have any control. It's up to Zelensky because he has the power to pull the trigger. Well, this is nonsensical. I can't imagine Trump or Putin being this totally stupid. It's unbelievable that either of them could be this stupid. So how is it that Woodcock is describing them as people without a brain? We know what happens. We know from the Polish guarantee what happens. Putin loses all control. Trump loses all control. This is nonsensical, Numa. It's totally. So can anything that Witkoff has said be true? If it is true, then all the outcome is in Zelensky's hands. He can pull the trigger and cause World War III, just like the Poles did when the idiot British gave them a guarantee. So that's that's what is so puzzling about all of this new. This is what's really um, it's really so amazing. And also, Newman, we still don't know what was the acceptable proposal that Putin said Witkoff gave him that caused Putin to agree to the meeting with Trump. There's no sign of this proposal. There's no mention of it. What was it? It's not in any agreement. So it looks like, Witkoff is up there orchestrating things. And Putin and Trump ain't got enough sense to see that. I don't know what else. I just don't know what else to make of it. Um, and of course, the most dangerous thing is that NATO protection without NATO membership puts Zelensky's finger on the trigger. This is like the
Mm.
guarantee the British gave Poland that immediately started World War II. Now, I think I've said before, probably in our discussions, but if not in other ones, that I've been reading P.J. Taylor's books on the First and Second World War, and what he shows conclusively, there's no doubt, uh, the peace negotiations are what produced the war. And I think that's what we're recognizing. Again, I think that's what we're seeing in front of us. That's what's happening again. So that's my take on it.
Paul, I really believe that Russia, in the eyes of Russians, they want a long-term scenario for what's going on in Ukraine. I don't know, as you've mentioned, we don't know the details of what has happened during the meeting and what was the proposal on the part of the United States, which was somehow interesting for Russians. But when it comes to the security guarantees to Ukraine, which Meloni was talking about, the something like Article 5 of NATO, and that would be the same for Russians, in my opinion. That would not bring any sort of difference in the future. They're, they will be able to put troops on the ground, send weapons to Ukraine, if that would be the guarantee that they're supporting, because they're doing this to Israel. Just compare what is happening in, they want something similar. And
Well,
if that's the case, that would be hugely influential for Russia.
what do you mean by hugely influential?
Hugely influential because that could bring a new confrontation between the West and Russia in the western part of Ukraine. Because look at Donald Trump and his administration. More 3 years, they're going to be in power, then they're gone. Who's going to guarantee a long term settlement for Russia? I think that Russia is thinking of it. We don't know the details, but I cannot imagine that Vladimir Putin is going to sign any sort of agreement without considering that.
Well, um, if what you're talking about is the prospect that Zelensky or Ukraine will get the benefits of NATO membership without being a member. This Article 5 thing means all of NATO would come to Ukraine's defense, even though Ukraine is not a member. So it's a way of getting around Putin's total opposition to Ukraine being a member. They're going to say, oh, he's not going to be a member. We can avoid this for you and for us, but we have to give him the protection of NATO, whether he's a member or not. Well, if you're saying, how can Putin accept this? I don't see how he can, because if he does, he's surrendered. He's given up. And that's what Witkoff said. He told Jake Draper on CNN that Putin had surrendered to Trump. That's what he said. Putin surrendered to Trump. Well, I can't believe that Putin did that. Why would he do that? Is it that the business interest in Russia would rather do business with Russia than be a sovereign nation? Maybe that's what maybe that's why Witkoff, who's the mover and shaker on the business deals, is involved in the Ukraine negotiations. Maybe that explains why he's there. Not Witkoff, I mean Dmitriev, Kirill Dmitriev, I think his name. Maybe that's why he's there, to sell Russia out, to get peace for the business at the expense of Russian sovereignty. Maybe that's what's going on. I don't know. You know, I raised at the beginning of our discussion, what is the role of this Dmitriev in the Ukraine business? And why is he said to be Putin's negotiator when, in fact, he's in charge of the business deals of the Russian investment fund, or whatever they call it? So maybe what's happened is there's been a silent coup in the Kremlin. And the westernized intellectual professional class have said that it's more important to be in business with the West and the Americans than to be sovereign. And so Putin is collapsing. Maybe that's an explanation. I don't know that it is, but it at least makes some sense out of what we're hearing. So, and I could go on in this vein. It's very It's very puzzling. And if Woodcock is so interested in having the success of the peace deal that he's been the messenger of, all the time, the back and forth that Woodcock has made with Russia, and the long time he spent with Putin that led to the Trump-Putin meeting, you would think he's invested in the success of this. But then when he stands up and says, well, Putin surrendered to Trump and Putin has abandoned all of his positions, he's willing to trade land. He's willing to have Ukraine protected by NATO. This undermines Putin at home. This makes Putin look like a total fool, a traitor. It's what it does. It makes him look that way. Does that mean that the westernized Russians have triumphed over the nationalists, the Russian sovereigntists? I don't know, but it's very strange. If I was Woodcock and I had invested so much of my time and reputation in trying to produce peace, I wouldn't go undermine it by going on television saying Putin surrendered to Trump. How does that help Putin in Russia? It doesn't help him. So if you try to make sense of it, it doesn't make sense. None of this makes any sense. And the least sensible thing is to give Zelensky the finger on the trigger by saying, okay, you've got the protection of NATO. You don't have to be a member to be protected. Yeah. And Putin's agreed, apparently, according to Woodcock. Well, if that's true, then the conclusion is that Woodcock's right. Putin surrendered. Russia is no longer sovereign. If what Woodcock says is true, Russia is no longer a sovereign nation. It's an American puppet state. Can Putin accept that? Will the military accept it? Whatever the westernized business and intellectual class. I mean, they've never supported Russia. So if you look at it the way I've just explained it, it either makes no sense whatsoever, or Putin has agreed to be Trump's puppet.
Paul, it seems to me that somehow they're trying to play with the mainstream media, because mainstream media tried to attack them. It seems to me something like a preemptive move on the part of the Trump administration that show how powerful, strong Donald Trump is and was during the meeting. Because you see the picture, he's flying B-2 bombers above boom, just to show how powerful. Because it's all, in my opinion, the Trump administration has some sort of policy to deal with the domestic policy in the United States. That's why they're using this sort of attitude to deal with that. It seems to me, because the tone of the meeting, when you look at the two presidents next to each other talking and giving their final address before leaving the scene, you see some sort of chemistry between the two. You see that wasn't something strange. You see the links, you see they totally understand each other. I didn't see any sort of dissatisfaction in the face and the way that Putin was expressing his final words before leaving the podium. How did you find that? Don't you think that it's a theater on the part of the Trump administration to see something, to show something different from what has happened during the meeting?
Well, I agree with you that the American Air Force show was Trump on stage for his supporters, for the patriotic Americans. Trump was telling all these patriotic Americans, look how powerful we are. Look, I'm showing Putin how powerful we are. So he'll realize that he has to do as he's told. So I think that was the purpose of all of that. And I think Putin understood that. On the other hand, Putin got up and left the meeting early. So, so how much Putin has agreed or what he's agreed, we don't know, because Witkoff's accounts, they don't make any sense. They, if if Witkoff is right, we'll be at war soon. Now, why is the Russian media so supportive of the meeting? Well, here we see the influence of the Russian business. They're all globalists. They all they know how to do business in the West. They don't know how to do it with Asians. They're comfortable with Europeans. They're not comfortable with Chinese. They all grew up in the decaying days of Soviet communism and looked at America and Europe as free and successful and the role model, what to be part of, and that's their mindset. And Russian sovereignty is nothing they value. They don't see any real value in it. You never see them. You never see one of the intellectual. Well, you do, but they're pushed aside. They're few, but you don't see Russian intellectuals or business leaders proud to be Russian. And so there is this constraint on Putin. Now, of course, the intellectuals are a small percentage of the population. The war in Ukraine has greatly increased the nationalist feelings of the majority of the people. So we see in Russia maybe a rising split between the vast bulk of the people and the intellectual business class. That and this is if this is so, it's a constraint on Putin. So when you try to make sense of all, you have to look far beyond the official narratives. You can dismiss them; they're all completely false. They're nonsensical, and so what is my conclusion? Well, we don't know. We don't know. We don't know what we can't make. I can't make anything sensible that's compatible with Putin's previous positions out of what is being said about these negotiations.
Paul, in your opinion, what do European leaders want from Donald Trump? They came to support Zelensky. They came to support their sort of mindset and policy in Ukraine. How? What is that? Is that some sort of support? Is that I don't see Donald Trump talking with Europeans and Zelensky and telling them what has happened, what has really happened during the meeting. He may told them some sort of talks that have happened between the two presidents, but he's not going to be reporting on all the in everything they have discussed during the meeting. What does Europe want from the United States in Ukraine?
Well, I think it's orchestrated. I think Washington has orchestrated it. It wants the Europeans there so the Europeans can object. So there can't be a settlement. So Trump can walk away. This is then cover for all of it landing in Europe's hands. And so they have to continue the war. So as I've seen this from the beginning, it's not as Trump trying to end the war, but shifting the responsibility to Europe. Because Netanyahu wants him to go to war with Iran. And he and his big mouth have got him at odds with China. And to take on three powerful military countries at once is beyond American capability, especially as has been emphasized that the West is out of weapons. We're out of weapons. Europe's out of them. And so they can't supply Ukraine. And yet Netanyahu wants us to go to war with Iran. And we keep sending destroyers into Chinese claimed waters. The last one was run out by the Chinese Navy. But sooner or later there's going to be an incident. So I would not be, I don't know this, Nina, but I would not be surprised if this is not the American ruling class orchestrating an opera. And here's Trump doing everything. He's meeting with Putin, he's meeting with Zelensky, he's meeting the Europeans, and the Europeans simply won't cooperate. They won't abandon Zelensky. Oh, if we abandon Zelensky, we'll be next. After Putin eats up Ukraine, he'll eat up Germany and France. This kind of line, I don't think any of them believe it, but it's an orchestration. It's a show. And the whole purpose is Trump gets out of it. Oh, they're impossible. Nobody would agree. Blah, blah, you know. And then he's ready to go to war for Netanyahu. There's been no break between Washington and Netanyahu, despite the extraordinary genocide, the massacre, the slaughter, the starvation. I mean, we're watching it. Total evil is what's happening in Gaza, and it's supported by Trump. So why does he care if Russians or Ukrainians are killed? He can't possibly care. He don't care what happens to the Gazans. He gives Israel the protection of diplomatic cover and all the weapons and all the money. And Trump could have stopped that by saying, no more money, no more weapons, no more diplomatic cover. I'm not going to veto the next UN resolution against you, Netanyahu. Well, you know, how many of America vetoed hundreds of UN, right? He's done nothing. So the notion, there are too many people being killed in Ukraine. What is Trump? Could care less. So I think it's an orchestrated show. Trump is going to get out and go to war with Ukraine, with Iran for Netanyahu, like we've been at war for Netanyahu for the entirety of the 21st century. We've destroyed 5 countries for Israel. And Iran is the 6th. and then there'll be Turkey. So,
Pakistan.
huh?
Oh, Pakistan. Israel has a long strategy for
You're
Pakistan.
right. You're right. Netanyahu added Pakistan to the list. Pakistan is now part of Greater Israel.
Yeah, yeah.
But the deal is that it's a little bit troublesome. Pakistan, they've got nuclear weapons. They know how to use them. They know they can launch them, and so that would have to be an internal coup that we organize, or which we can do with money. We just buy them. So all of this is speculation. Everything I've said. But it's speculation trying to make sense of things that don't make sense. Why would Putin abandon his position and accept NATO protection of Ukraine, pretending it's okay because Ukraine's not a member? And why would he agree to land transfers, which means he has to turn back over to Ukraine land that is currently part of the Russian Federation? Well, if he does this, he's going to demoralize the Russian army. He's going to demoralize all the Russians who lost family members fighting for that land. He's going to turn the Russian nationalists against him. To stay in power, he'll have to become a dictator and start oppressing Russian nationalists. Well, I don't think the intellectual and business class in Russia is that strong. And so I don't, so that's why I doubt what Witkoff reports is true. I don't believe it's true and I don't see how it helps the peace process for Witkoff to proclaim that Putin has surrendered to Trump. I mean, that kills the peace process. So, some people are busy reading the tea leaves.
Paul, I think that would be to be somehow logical. We know more than 3 years there in the mainstream media, European leaders in the United States and in Europe, they're talking about that Russia wants to subsume all of Ukraine and march toward Europe. So let's assume with these two assumptions on their part. Russia says this: you want security guarantee? I'm not gonna attack Europe. I'm gonna give you a guarantee I'm not gonna attack Europe. I'm not gonna subsume all of Ukraine, the western part of Ukraine. So what else do you want? You reached and you may have, after all, I think Russia needs to somehow talk about the rhetoric they had during the war. What else do they need from Russia? Neutrality of Ukraine would be one of them, and no. So what else does Trump want? Does Europe want, in your opinion? So they have achieved all of the things that they were somehow spreading fear mongering that Russia wants to conquer Europe, conquer the western part of Ukraine, all of Ukraine. So Russia can guarantee that.
You see, Trump is president in a country whose foreign policy doctrine says the goal of American foreign policy is to prevent the rise of any country that can serve as a constraint on American foreign policy, on American unilateralism. Who is that? Russia, China, and on a regional basis, Iran. So as long as you have that doctrine, you cannot have peace with Russia. Peace is foreclosed by the doctrine. You have to overcome them. No one has repudiated the doctrine. The doctrine's not even in discussion. I'm the only one that keeps bringing it up. There's nobody in the foreign policy community saying, what in the hell, how can we have peace with the Russians when we have this doctrine, which requires us to overcome them, not make peace with them. So Trump is in a situation where he has a foreign policy doctrine that says there's no way you're going to make peace with Russia. And then we have the interest of the American military security complex. Their profits, their budgets, their power depends on the Russian enemy. You're going to take away their enemy? What happens? Down go their sales, down go their profits, down goes their power, their influence in Congress. Are they going to sit there and say, oh, go ahead and destroy us? No, they're not. They're going to stop the process. No one discusses this. No one acknowledges it. It's all, oh, it's all going to be wonderful. If you read the comments by the Russian commentators, these people don't have any sense. They got no realization of what they're up against. Oh, it's all over now. We're safe. There was a whole series of one of the Russian English language RT or Sputnik of these Russian commentators, all of their hopeful expectations and explanations. It's mindless. It's absolutely mindless. The Russians look like they're sitting ducks. That's what it looks like. And what have the neoconservatives disappeared? No. They run all the conservative journals, all the conservative think tanks, all the conservative foundations. They in all kinds of important foreign policy positions. They're the voices. What about the military security complex? Did it disappear? Did all the military bases in all the 50 states and all the armaments factories in all the 50 states, did they disappear? No, they're still there. They have powerful influence on the congressmen and senators from their state, on the governors. Can Trump just run over these people? And the Russians, they're not aware of this. They're so totally incompetent, they're not aware of this. And peace is going to come out of it. I mean,
Paul,
really, Nima, really, it's absurd. The whole thing is absurd. I mean, how can Trump want peace when the neoconservatives don't? When the military security complex doesn't? It's some kind of a show. It has to be. And the real mystery is what is Witkoff up to? Who is he serving? And what is this Kirill Dmitriev up to? Who is he serving? These are the people that need some scrutiny. What the hell is going on? You know, Putin's principal advisor, as he's called, Kirill Dmitriev, this guy's a member of the American establishment. He's a graduate of Stanford University, Harvard Business School. He entered his career at Goldman Sachs. And he's representing Russia? It's not possible. He's a young leader at the World Economic Forum. And he's representing Putin. I mean, it's absurd. I've said several times, I've finished rereading twice A.P.J. Taylor's
Mm.
history of World War I, World War II, everybody in peace negotiations, all the peace negotiations did was produce war because everybody in them was constrained by their constituencies. They could not make a good decision. They wanted to make good decisions. They didn't want war, but they couldn't make a good decision because all the constraints on them. And so bad decisions piled on bad decisions, blunders on blunders, and the result was war. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah. Paul, with the situation I believe that the situation in Azerbaijan and Armenia is much bigger than what we're talking about and what we've been seeing so far. And
Yeah.
do you feel that it's somehow amazing to me that Donald Trump, who's talking about withdrawing the troops from Europe, from Syria, and somehow talking about Iraq as well, he's going to that region, to the Azerbaijan and Armenia. It's somehow amazing. Do you think that the British are dragging him into that region, or there is some sort of
No, it's
policy in the
it's the American doctrine of American hegemony that put us there. The neoconservatives put us in the South Caucasus, disrupting the Chinese Silk Road, occupying Iran's northern borders, and corrupting two former provinces of the Soviet Union. Uh, you see, the whole question of Putin, what Putin should be saying in his meeting with Trump is, what the hell are you doing in our South Caucasus? If you want peace in Ukraine, why are you in the South Caucasus? That's just as important to us, if not more. And why aren't the Chinese? Where are the Chinese? Why aren't, if Putin can bring all his European allies, I'm sorry, if Zelensky can bring all of his European allies to the meeting, how come Putin can't bring the Chinese? What does the Chinese say? What are you doing occupying part of our Silk Road? Now, when China and Russia and Iran won't even mention their threatened vital interests in the South Caucasus, it tells you they simply don't have any leadership. They're completely blind. They don't know what's happening to them. That this isn't a major issue shows people, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, have got their head in the sand. Their heads in the sand. Now, of course, one explanation for all of this is that Putin knows all of this, the Chinese know all of this, the Iranians know all of this, and so they're going along to gain time while they build up such extreme power that they can simply annihilate the West. That's one possible explanation. Because it's hard to believe that the Chinese, Russian, Iranian leadership are so totally blind and incompetent. So maybe they're saying, okay, they've made it clear to us that we're targets and we can't pretend any longer that we aren't. And so let's get ready and take them out. So let's smooth them. Let's go along with them. Let's give in here, give in there, keep them off guard, get prepared, and then we'll just wipe them out. That's another that's another explanation. But you see, what indicates that something like that's in the works is all of a sudden, where did all this goodwill come from? All this goodwill we're supposed to be witnessing with Trump meeting with Putin. Where did it come from? Sudden. Suddenly it's there. Where did it come from? There hasn't been any goodwill. Putin's been trying to get a mutual security agreement with the West for years.
Hmm.
He and Lavrov begged the Biden administration, basically on their knees, begging. They begged the EU, they begged NATO, and they got a complete, total cold shoulder. Where does this goodwill all of a sudden come from that we're supposedly now involved in? All this goodwill. Oh, it's all good. What produced it? Where did it come from? Trump changed his mind about something. Something that Witkoff said struck Putin as an acceptable proposal. What was it? No one told us. We don't know what it is. There's no sign of it in the agreements so far. The only sign is Putin's concessions, not Trump's proposal that was acceptable to Putin. The only sign of it, according to Witkoff, is Putin surrendered. He accepts NATO protection for Ukraine. He accepts a land swap, which means giving up Russian territory. Well, what produced this goodwill? Where'd it come from? Nowhere. So you see, Numa, the thing, we're either watching the final moments of the total stupidity of the human race before we simply disappear, or we're watching an orchestrated show. I don't know which it
I
is.
totally agree with you, Paul.
I don't know which it is, Nima, but it's one or the other. And
I think it's the latter, in my opinion. It's all a theater. They're playing with all of us, but let's see what would happen. And there's part of me totally agree with you, Paul, that somehow you look at the behavior of the governments in Russia, Iran, and China, it seems to me so naive the way that they're dealing with these issues, these important issues that could, it's, yeah, if you lose it, you lose it, and you cannot come back and do something different. That's why I don't understand what the sort of attitude they have. Thank you so much, Paul, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.
okay, Nemo, I thank you and appreciate your questions. I I think that unless people get real about what's going on, we're not going to be here much longer.
Yeah. Exactly. See you soon, Paul. Great pleasure.
Send me the URL.
I'll send it to you. Bye bye.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.